joined by Memory Kaluba from ZNPHI, who will be taking through, she's our didactic presenter and she'll be taking through this topic. And so thank you for joining us, Memory. We'll be joined in by our panel of experts. Today we're going to be joined by Dr. Musole Chipoya, Dr. Paul Zulu, Ms. Princess Kayeye, Mr. Philip Bameke, and Dr. Victor Ebo. Your facilitator for today, my name is Dr. Neil Naik, and I think we'll start with our presentation. All right, so over to you, Memory.
Thank you so much, and I'm happy to be here. We'll straight go into the objectives of our presentation. This is to provide an overview of WPV1 response. This is to provide an overview of WPV1 response in Zambia, to provide an update on the BOPV SIS conducted in the country, as well as update on surveillance and how to identify true AFP cases.
So this brings us to our first poll question. Globally, our question reads, globally, which two countries remain endemic for the wild poliovirus? And we have four options. Option A, Afghanistan and Somalia. Option B, Malawi and Afghanistan. Option C, Afghanistan and Pakistan. And option D, Pakistan and Syria. So which two countries remain endemic for a wild poliovirus? So four options: Afghanistan and Somalia, Malawi and Afghanistan, Afghanistan and Pakistan and Syria. Can have more people trying. Okay, great. So end the poll over here, and of note, Memory, we have a B, which has taken up 63%, showing that Malawi and Afghanistan was a greater option, followed by Afghanistan and Pakistan, with poor response to A and D. I'll hand over back to you.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I have to provide the answer right now, or maybe we allow for people to go through the presentation and see if they'll be able to get the actual correct answer.
Okay, I think we can go ahead with that.
Okay, what is the epidemiology of the current polio that we're responding to in Zambia? So Zambia received notification of the detection of WPV1 type 1 in Malawi on February 2022, 17. The virus was detected in the stool of a 3-year-old female with onset of paralysis on November 19, 2021, with no history of travel. 6 additional cases have been also detected in Mozambique, and some are genetically linked to the Malawian case. Following the Malawian case notification, the country since conducted 3 rounds of supplementary immunization activities in response to the ongoing WPV1 outbreak in the sub-region. Polio mainly affects children of under 5 years old. 1 in 200 infections leads to irreversible paralysis. Among those paralyzed, 5 to 10% die when their breathing muscles become immobilized. Cases due to wild poliovirus have decreased by over 99% since 1998, from an estimated 350,000 cases then to 33 reported cases in 2018. If a single child remains infected, children in all countries are at risk of contracting polio. This is because of the 1 to 200 ratio, where you have one paralysis in 200 infections. What is the surveillance risk? African region was declared free of indigenous WPV1 in August 2020. The presence of WPV1 with 19 changes signifies 200, 2 years silent transmission. Area of the most recent circulations are yet to be known. Detection of the second case in the region, like we did in Malawi, in Mozambique, results in receding of the WPV1 free status of the African region. While the national AFP surveillance indicators targets met by the countries, in the sub-national level, there's suboptimal performance, meaning our surveillance so far hasn't been as sensitive as we hope it to be for us to detect as many AFP cases and also maybe declare the country as free from WPV1, especially that our neighbor countries are reporting cases. What are the response that are ongoing and also measures in place since the detection of the WPV1 in Malawi? So the country has had 3 SIA campaigns this far. Round 1 was it took place in 3 provinces, that is in Lusaka, Eastern, and Chinga. The idea actually was to respond to the Malawian case, and these are the bordering provinces when you look at the map. And this took place on the 21st March 2022. Round 2 SIA countrywide was a countrywide SIA that took place around 25th April 2022. And round 3 is the just ended SIA. That was a countrywide campaign as well. That was on the 5th August 2022. The country is actually planning to go for the 4th round, which is set to be on the 27th October 2022. So all these have been measures to supplement routine immunizations, as well as to respond to the cases that are being detected in the sub-region, and especially our neighbor countries that are still, that have continued to record cases of WPV1. So what happens during these SIS, and how do we measure the activity, the campaigns? So we use the administrative coverage and the target populations using the administrative coverage. So this is an analysis showing the results for the just ended round 3 SIA campaign. And from the map, from the legends and the map, we are able to see that 97% of the 116 districts nationwide at the coverage of at least equal to 95%. So it means we were actually equal to and also slightly beyond our admin coverage. And 400,027, 533, which is 9% more eligible under 5 years children from round 2 were vaccinated in round 3. So this brings us to more children that were vaccinated compared to the previous rounds. And this is also the target for the campaign that is being planned for. This slide is showing the round 3 LQS coverage by province. So LQS is a lot quality assurance sampling survey. So this is the measure that they use to measure how the performance of the campaign, the quality of the campaign. So compared to round 2, 13 more districts passed the LQS in round 3, giving us a coverage of 66% compared to round 2. So this shows that there was at least an improvement from the previous round. All districts in round 3 submitted LQS reports except for Senanga district, and that did not submit a full report. Generally, there was great improvement across all districts except for Copper Belt and Southern Province that showed a decline in performance. So in such districts, we have, in such provinces, we have some districts that actually performed better during the round 2 and did not perform equal to or more than during round 3. So meaning their performance actually went below our expectation. The acceptable threshold of the country conducting SIA is 80% of the districts should pass LQS. This is showing, this is an analysis showing the districts' performance during round 1, round 2, and round 3 using the LQS results. So this is by province, and in the first column, it shows us districts that fell during the round 3. So we can see that from all provinces, the 10 provinces of the country, we've had some districts that have failed LQS. Then the second column is showing us districts that failed round 2 and round 1. And this also shows we have districts from all provinces that failed both round 2 and round 3. The high priority districts are those that have failed continuously during round 1, round 2, and round 3. And as we can see, we have Eastern Province that has conducted its SIS for the 3rd time. We have Kasanengwa, Katete, and Bubi districts that have failed 3 times. And also in Lusaka, we have Rufunsa that have failed 3 times. The rest have improved, but then this is not an exemption from those that failed round 2 and round 3. Remember, round 1 only took place in 3 provinces. So there is also a possibility that some districts have not yet improved. What are some of the lessons learned following the SIS conducted? Adequate micro plans at all levels is key. Health workers and CBVs remain the main source of information. Use of traditional leaders, churches, and schools helped in disseminating the information faster. Social mobilizers need to be in the field at least 3 and 5 days prior to the campaign to help reach every household, and then how to reach areas where not sufficiently visited due to inadequate resources.
Okay, thanks, Memory. So this brings to our second poll question. And this reads, how many serotypes of poliovirus are there? So we have 4 options. There's option A, which is 3 serotypes, option B, 1 serotype, option C, 2 serotypes, and option D, 5 serotypes. So how many serotypes of poliovirus are there? Option A, 3, option B, 1, option C, 2, and option D, 5. All right, I'll close the poll over here, and an interesting response of option A being the most common answer. So back to you, Memory.
Thank you. Yes. So here we are looking at surveillance risk of poliovirus. So we are saying this is an RNA virus and 3 serotypes, 1, 2, and 3. And immunity against one does not cover immunity against the other type. And this rapidly inactivated by heat, formalin, chlorine, and UV light. There. Okay, I'm not able to see. We'll bring that one down. Yes. Okay. So response activities conducted in terms of surveillance to WPV1 recorded in Malawi. So we have enhanced surveillance, active case search, and environmental surveillance. And we have AFP surveillance trainings that have been conducted in 9 out of 10 provinces this far. And the one province that is remaining, Northern Province, is scheduled to conduct its training this next month. Health workers and community sensitization has continued. And also we have enhanced routine immunizations of using BOPV and IPV vaccines. Paralytic poliomyelitis, clinical presentation of paralysis. So how does this slide also explains how polio presents itself? So we are saying this is asymmetrical paralysis. That means it usually affects one side of the limb. And the kind of paralysis is floppy, and this presents itself in, it shows itself in the muscle tone. So there is loss of muscle tone, and paralysis moves from proximal to distal. That means it starts from the big muscle near the body and moves to the outer parts of the body. What is the purpose of polio surveillance? So it is AFP, which is a sudden onset of paralysis or weakness in any part of the body in a child of less than 15 years. However, it's not a limitation. Any person of any age with paralytic illness, if suspected by the clinician, could be a suspect of AFP. AFP surveillance is, however, the gold standard for detecting transmission of poliovirus. So poliovirus in Zambia, this is just giving us a background and a little bit of history of outbreak of circulating vaccine-derived poliovirus in Zambia. This was recorded in 2019 September, confirmed case of a vaccine-derived poliovirus type 2 in a 2-year-old 8-month male child of Chiengi district in Luapula in 2019. The case had no history of vaccination since birth, and history shows paralysis following 24 hours of fever. So how is polio diagnosed? This cannot be confirmed using clinical symptoms alone, and also no blood tests to confirm polio diagnosis. The only way is an isolation of a poliovirus in a stool specimen, and that is only processed at a WHO accredited laboratory. In Zambia, we are very lucky because other countries do not have one. We have one accredited WHO laboratory that processes samples for polio. What are the key steps of AFP surveillance? Number one is finding and reporting children with AFP. Number two is to collect stool specimen as soon as possible after onset of paralysis. And lastly, testing of these specimens in the WHO accredited poliovirus lab to confirm or exclude the presence of poliovirus. So this is an analysis showing performance of AFP surveillance in 2022 as of week 38, which is just the just ended week. And it shows the total of 268 AFP cases have been reported so far this year. And 5 provinces have achieved the non-polio AFP rate of 3 and above, which is the target. And then also we have some provinces, the stool adequacy rate is at 64% as a country. So when you look at when a sample is collected, the stool sample, there are some conditions that are supposed to be met. And one of them is the stool sample. It needs to arrive at the laboratory in good condition. So which is we are referring to as the stool adequacy rate. And of the samples that have been brought to the lab following the AFP notification and sample collections, the country is at 64% of these the quality of the sample. That means we are not reaching the target, which is at least 80%, and which is the goal. If we could reach there, we'll be very sure of the samples being taken to the lab.
Okay, thanks, Memory. So this brings us to our third poll question. Our question here reads, there are 3 types of polio. There's 1, 2, and 3. Types 2 and 3 are eradicated. Is this true or false? So option A is true and option B is false. So we have 3 types of polioviruses, type 1, type 2, and type 3. And of these, type 2 and 3 have been eradicated. Is this true or false? Okay, I'll end the poll over here. Some good response. So we've got 61% that have chosen option A as true, and 39% that have chosen option B as false. Okay. And I think we have the fourth poll question, which reads, early symptoms of polio are clinically indistinguishable from flu symptoms. Is this true or false? So early symptoms of polio are clinically indistinguishable from flu symptoms. True or false? Okay, so again, interesting response. We have 68% that have chosen option A as true and 32% that have chosen option B as false. I think back to you, Memory.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, we have poll question number 5. This question reads, the following are the symptoms of poliovirus except. So this is a single choice question. We have A, flaccid paralysis, B, fever, tiredness, headache, sore throat, vomiting, stiffness of the limbs, limb pain and paralysis, and C, spastic paralysis. The following are symptoms of poliovirus except A, flaccid paralysis, B, fever, tiredness, headaches, sore throat, vomiting, stiffness of the neck, muscle ache, and limb pain and paralysis. And option C, spastic paralysis. Okay. So we have C, who's about 76% of the network that have opted for spastic paralysis, and option B by 24%. I think, hand over to you now.
Thank you.
Oh, one more poll question, sorry. So we have our last poll question. What is acute flaccid paralysis? And we have options A, which is sudden onset of floppy paralysis in children less than 15 years due to any cause. Option B, sudden onset of floppy paralysis in children less than 15 years due to polio. And C, acute onset of spastic paralysis. So the question reads again, what is acute flaccid paralysis? Option A, sudden onset of floppy paralysis in children less than 15 years due to any cause. Option B, sudden onset of floppy paralysis in children less than 15 years due to polio. And option C, acute onset of spastic paralysis. Okay, so end the poll over here. And we've got 67% of the network that have chosen option A and 33% that have chosen option B. Okay, finally over to you, Memory.
Thank you. It's good. We are having a lot of questions about AFP, and this is our next slide. So for those that chose different answers, they are not wrong. We are still learning more about these. So just before we talk of the AFP, maybe just a little bit of history about WPV1 in our country. So the country last recorded the case of WPV1 from the Angolan child in a local Zambian community bordering Angola, date which was 27th February 2002 in Shangombo district, Western province. The child had no history of immunization. Then in 1995, the last case was a WPV1 in a 6-year-old male child from Lusaka district, Lusaka province, with the date of onset paralysis was 30th December 1995. We as a country have since not recorded any other WPV1 case. So the environmental surveillance was established in 2018, and so far 10 environmental surveillance sites were selected in 2 provinces. So we have currently 4 sites in Lusaka and also 6 sites in Copperbelt province. Poliovirus isolated, no WPV and CVDPV isolated. CVDP, this is circulating vaccine-derived poliovirus. And then other events, we have had one Sabin type 2 poliovirus event isolated in November 2018 from Kitwe district, and this was coming from the environmental surveillance. And then we have additional sites that are now conducting the environmental surveillance, and that is Chipata, one of the provinces that have been added to the 2 provinces that were selected in 2018. And this is a map showing places and districts where these environmental samples are being collected. And as we can see, we have in Copperbelt, and then we also have in Lusaka, and an addition in Central Province, Eastern Province. So the case that caused the response in the country is the WPV1 case that was reported in February in Malawi, Lilongwe district. So the child was aged 3 years old and female, and this child had no history of travel. Child received only one BOPV birth dose, and we have the address, and also the onset of paralysis date was in November 19th, 2021, and samples were collected on the 26th and 27th November, because why we have 2 dates is because for the AFP sample, where you're suspecting polio, you have to collect 2 samples. And then this means one was collected on the 26th November, and the following day, 24 hours later, they collected another sample. That was last year in November. And then we have 6 contact samples collected, and these were taken to South African WHO accredited lab. So this is a map showing just a place in Lilongwe where this case was coming from. So it was coded on the map. So why is this WPV1 and this one case reported in Malawi a concern? So it is because of the non-polio AFP rate, and these legends here show with the neighboring countries from 2019 and 2021. So in 2019, 2020 and 2021, this is just a picture of showing us the non-polio AFP rate. And then we have also the stool adequacy. As we can see in red, we have at least 80% that were reporting. And then we have no, like in white, where it's showing no color, it shows no AFP case reported. So it means these districts in all these countries that are showing on the maps, they have been silent. So if they have been silent, they are not reporting any sort of paralysis. It means we are not able to detect and suspect polio. So, and because of that, this is why it is a huge concern. When you look at the mappings, you find that we have a lot of those that are showing white, those are districts, and it's not only in our country, but if we look at them critically, you'll find that in 2019, 2020, and also 2021, actually Zambia is showing more whites compared to even other countries. It means our stool adequacy rate has been very low. And we, just from the previous slides, we've noted that we are currently at 64% as a country. So this also shows a proportion of 0-dose cases, 6 to 59 months of age. So this is about immunizations, and this is a picture that we have even from the neighboring countries of children, eligible children that are receiving these vaccines. And then this is also another picture, an analysis showing the proportion with 1 or 2 doses and under immunized cases, and also age 6 to 9 months. So this is why when you look at the pictures, you find that we have places that are really showing very low immunizations, and also because of that, it becomes of a very high concern. Because if children are not immunized, from the examples that we've had of the previous cases we've had in the countries and even the neighboring countries, you'll find that the immunization, these children did not have any immunizations at all, and whilst others have only got 1 dose, whereas under routine immunization, a child is supposed to have up to 4 immunizations. against polio. So when they are under immunizations and the map shows like this, it shows that we are even at a very high risk. And this is why the WPV1 reported in Malawi is a concern, because of also the immunization status. So from the legends that we just looked at, this is why is it our concern and the rationale for the multi-country outbreak response. As we may be aware, we have a lot of 5 other countries in the sub-region that are equally responding the same way through the SIS to the WPV1 reported in Malawi in February, as well as the cases that have continued to be reported from Mozambique. So available administrative routine immunization data, which we just showed, demonstrates good coverage at national level. However, some of the district coverage have been below 80% for 2 or 3 consecutive years. And then the last WPV1 case in Malawi was in 1992, in Tanzania, and in 1996 in Tanzania. And we had a last WPV1 in 1992 in Malawi. Last BOPV and TOPV SIS in the sub-region were done at least 10 years ago. At-risk target population group likely to include children older than 5 years old, looking at when last we had these SIS and how people have not been fully getting immunized or their children immunized. So population movement, it is of concern that high population movement is high across these neighboring countries due to clan linkages, trade, and other economic and social reasons. So when a case is reported in Malawi, it's as good as we are at equal risk because there is a continuous interaction in these countries. We have already talked about the 3 years old and also the surveillance risk. And maybe we look at the AFP. What are the signs and symptoms? So we have some of the symptoms include sore throat, fever, tiredness, nausea, headache, stomach pain, and then would have questions like, what about feeling of pins and needles in the legs? And also, how about stiff neck, severe, unusual headache, or maybe associated with nausea, or difficult in concentrating, seizure, or meningitis. So, and then would also look at the weakness in the arm, the leg, or both hand and leg. Is it a flaccid paralysis, or is it a stiff one? Then there's sore throat, tiredness, pins, headache, bedridden, and even death. So these are some of the symptoms and signs that will make you suspect if this is polio, because it has got its own unique presentation. So clinical manifestations of poliovirus infections, this just shows that 1% will be paralyzed, and then we'll have about 80% that will show some clinical illness or no paralysis at all, but they'll have some of these symptoms that we've talked about. And then 70%, which is a large number, remains asymptomatic. So this means that when we have one paralysis, it means we have many more other children that could be infected in the similar manner, but they are either asymptomatic or they are showing no paralysis. So what is our summary about the diagnosis of polio? Number one is that you cannot confirm polio cases as polio using clinical symptoms alone. So in as much as a child will present with symptoms, some of which we've discussed, the child, you cannot diagnose and confirm polio just by those symptoms alone. And we do not collect blood to test or to confirm if this child is suffering from polio or has been affected by polio. But what we do is an isolation of a poliovirus in a stool specimen that is collected after the onset of paralysis. So it is only from a paralytic child that we collect this. But this does not limit us when we look at AFP, like we had before. When we look at AFP, AFP is not only from a paralytic, it's not only polio, but there are different other conditions that will cause a child to have the acute flaccid paralysis. And to confirm if it is polio is why we collect that stool sample, because it is only an isolation of the poliovirus from such a sample, or even environmental sample that you can confirm polio, and not any other mode, and also any other specimen to be collected from a child. And also we have to bear in mind, how is this paralysis? So one thing is it has to be acute, and it has to be flaccid, and also the child will have a weakness in the limb that is affected, and yes, and also acute.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Memory. That was a lovely presentation, a lot of learning points in your presentation. It's interesting to see how we are doing as a nation. At this point of time, I'm going to rerun the poll questions just to see how much learning has happened at this. So back to our first poll question. Sorry. We do them later. So we take questions, Q&A now. Okay. So, sorry, at this point of time, we'll take questions and contributions from the network. You can raise your hands, or you can post your questions in the chat box below. So we have no questions as of yet in the chat box. Any questions or contributions from the network?
Good afternoon, Chair.
Good afternoon, thank you.
Yes, I just have a concern. If you can just highlight more on the 60 days follow-up, especially for these samples where we receive feedback of not meeting the stool adequacy standards I submit.
We have on the platform the experts that maybe I could throw the questions to, so that they could help address some of these. Oh, if there is anyone on the platform.
Okay, so we have our panel of experts. We have Dr. Victor Ebo and Mr. Philip Bameke. Sir, may you please pick up this question?
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you, Memory, for that. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yeah, good afternoon. Thank you, Memory, for that very detailed overview. So for the 60-day follow-up, yes, usually for the required standard by the surveillance indicators is that stool samples should be collected within 14 days of identifying and confirming that it's an AFP, as acute flaccid paralysis. But in some cases, we have where we can't collect stool samples and it goes beyond that 14 days, then we still encourage and surveillance officers to still follow up with those cases and to ensure that, even after we've passed the required 14 days, to go and verify if the paralysis is still exists, and also to follow up with the child to ensure that stool samples are collected even after the 14 days. So for Zambia, like she has rightly said, we've had a backlog of many cases that have been missed, and because surveillance indicators were not properly followed up. So we encourage the surveillance officers within the districts and provinces to ensure that even those cases that were, identified after the 14 days of the onset of paralysis, and that at least you should still go on to verify if the paralysis is still existing, and also to ensure that those samples are collected. And just in addition to Memory's presentation, just to inform everyone on the line, on the call, that the outbreak response, like he said, is in response to wild poliovirus in our neighboring countries, Malawi and Mozambique. And so far, it started with one case in Malawi, but as of today, we've had additional 6 wild poliovirus cases isolated in Mozambique. We also have 5 additional circulating vaccine-derived polioviruses, type 1 and type 2, in Malawi, and 2 in Malawi, and 5 in Mozambique. So it gives us, if the fact that we have not had any case in Zambia, we are still at risk of importation because of the dynamics of cross-border movement across the borders in Malawi, across the borders that we share with Malawi and Mozambique. So as clinicians, as healthcare workers, these teachings, these learning sessions are very important for us to maintain a high index of suspicion when we have children who come into the facilities and with a history of weakness of the limbs. As long as they are below 15 years, we do not have to wait until we have a confirmed diagnosis of polio. Please, as much as possible, we should collect other stool samples, have stool samples collected and sent to the lab. Once again, thank you for a very informative session. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Ebo. We have another question in the chat box, which reads, which 2 vaccines of polio are very safe between the OPV and the IPV?
Yeah, so all okay.
So, sorry, doctor, you can go ahead.
Yeah, so thanks for that question about the choice of vaccines. So both vaccines are very safe. The oral polio vaccines are very safe. The OPV vaccines, the inactivated polio vaccine are also very safe. But when there's an active outbreak going on, like we have, the oral polio vaccines are the vaccine of choice. Number one, because they are easy to disseminate. You do not need as much manpower like you need with the injectable ones, because those are the IPVs which are injectable. You can quickly disseminate the vaccines across the country, reach wider population, reach more children with the vaccines. And then also with the oral polio vaccine, if you're, it is absorbed in the gut, and it generates antibodies quickly, which can also form a layer of protection to other children who are unvaccinated. Now, for the injectable polio vaccine, the inactivated polio vaccine, which is administered IM, because it requires additional, you have to be skilled in administering injectables. And then also it takes a while to develop antibodies because it's injected into the bloodstream, and it takes a while for the antibodies to develop. So it's usually given when you have achieved herd immunity. So herd immunity is when a certain level, at least you have 95% of the population have achieved antibodies against a particular disease. So until you get to that point, that is when you can only use IPV. So we still use IPV in addition. It is part of in Zambia, it was introduced in 2017 as part of the routine immunization. But because we have not achieved complete herd immunity, during an outbreak response like we are having in the region, we still advocate for the use of OPV. But IPV and OPV are both very safe to use. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ebo. Louis Dube, you've raised your hand. You may ask your question or contribution.
Thank you so much, Doc. I think mine is just a follow-up question from the previous speaker who raised the question on the 60 days follow-up. And so my question is, here is a case, maybe the 14 days has elapsed and the 60 days again have elapsed. Do you still continue to get the samples from the cases from the index case, the 3 samples from the index case? That's my question.
Right, thank you, Luis. Dr. Ebo, would you like to take that up, please?
Yes, sorry, can you repeat the question? Did you, if I get you clearly, are you saying to still collect samples?
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Here is a question again, Doc. I'm saying here is a case, the 14 days have elapsed and the 60 days again has elapsed. Do you continue to get the 3 samples to from the contacts to the index case? That's my question.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, since you have already taken samples from the index case, 14 days have elapsed, 6 days have elapsed, you do not need to take another sample again from the contacts. That will not be necessary anymore. And for such cases, when you have a follow-up case like that, it's also good to also inform the National Polio Expert Committee so that that will also be properly classified as part of the cases in the country. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you, Doc, for that. And yeah, thank you for, I think I've gotten your consent. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Ebo and Luis. Can maybe take one last question or a contribution from the network. You can go ahead, Chileleko Mapiki.
Thank you so much, Doc. Sorry I joined in late if this question was answered, but I have this question. If a child, for example, comes for their OPV2 dose after a month, or they come 2 months later from the previous dose, when we're giving the OPV3, do we give it just as OPV3 or we start again from OPV0 or OPV1? How do we go about that if a mother brings a child late for their next dose of the OPV vaccine? Hope that's clear.
Thank you, Chileleko. Dr. Ebo?
Yes, thank you for that question. And if I get you clearly, you're asking if the child has had 2 doses. Again, how old is this child? And if the child has had 2 doses, ideally before the child is 14 weeks, should have had at least 4 doses of OPV. I bet those 6 weeks, 14 weeks, and then 10 weeks, and then 14 weeks. Again, like we said previously, the OPV doses are safe. And if the child has had only 2 doses and has missed, the exact time you should have the 3rd dose, it will still be considered as a 3rd dose, and the child should still go ahead to have the 3rd dose. I think the key message here is that at least we want all children to be fully vaccinated before they get to the age of 3 years, to have had at least 4 doses of the oral polio vaccines, and then in addition, the IPV. So please, if a child misses even the 3rd dose at the expected time, please, we still encourage the child to still have that dose whenever it's available for them. During this outbreak response that we have in the countries, we go door to door and house to house. The idea of going door to door and house to house is for us to reach as many children as possible. We understand that due to the COVID, the pandemic, a lot of people, because they were more at home, were not going to, to the clinics for routine immunization. So that contributed to a decrease in the routine immunization coverage. So this is one of the key important areas of, house to house and door to door strategy of the polio eradication. That every child is reached, however, whichever the location is, we ensure that we get to every child. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Which will bring us to our last question in the chat box. During mass vaccination, is nutrition status of the children being vaccinated considered? I know that nutrition status determines whether the child is eligible to be vaccinated or not. So the question is that, is the nutritional status of children being considered when vaccinating them against polio? Dr. Ebo, sorry, there's a question.
Hello. Okay, yeah, I didn't want to be the one asking all the questions, but yes, the nutritional status of the child is very important. But again, as long as there is no contraindication, like immunocompromised children, children on special treatments, we do not, we encourage all children, even sick children, to even have the vaccines, because studies have shown that, you know, even with children who are malnourished, children who are sick, there has been no compromise. There has been no disruption or any adverse effects reported. So as long as, you know, you do not have any clear instructions from the caregivers that, you know, using the vaccine during, if they have any particular condition, like if they're immunocompromised, we encourage that, you know, children, even malnourished children, should still be vaccinated.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Ebo. Mr. Philip Bameke, do you have any comments or contributions for the presentation?
Yeah, thank you so much. Wonderful presentation and for all the questions. I think most of the comments have been passed by my colleague, Dr. Victor. And just to see on the last question on malnourished children, even though, obviously, like you mentioned, yes, we know that their immunity, you know, is lower than compared to a normal child, but combining OPV even with IPV will actually reduce the immunity gap they have for the malnourished children. But no child should be left out when given the vaccine during the mass vaccination campaign, just to add to that. And then on the OPV and IPV, you know, asking if it's safe, yes, it's safe. And also when there's actually a combination of that, OPV and IPV given to a child, it actually, you know, will boost, the immunity of the child more. So they are both safe. And sometimes when they are both combined, it actually improves the immunity of the child. Thank you, over.
Right, thank you so much, sir. And at this point of time, I'll reintroduce the poll questions. Sorry, just a second. So we'll start with the question, how many serotypes of poliovirus are there? We have option A, 3, option B, 1, option C, 2, and option D, 5. How many serotypes of poliovirus are there? Let's see if learning has taken place during this presentation. All right, so end the poll over here. So most have opted for option A, which is 3. I'll share the next question. So there are 3 types of polio virus, type 1, type 2, and 3. Types 2 and 3 are eradicated. Is this true or false? A for option true and B for false. Okay, so I'll end the poll over here. So we have 68% that have opted for option A and 32% that have opted for option B. Any comments, Memory?
All right, thank you. Actually, because we have the panel of experts and Mr. Philip didn't speak much, maybe you could, if you would want to address this one, I would like to get his comment now.
Okay, so
Mr. Philip.
Mr. Philip, would you like to comment on this? Because we still have a number that have chosen option B, 32%, and option A, who have chosen 68%.
Okay, if it's not there, the answer is actually A.
Okay, so we have option A, which is the
Yes.
correct option. I'll share the next poll. So early symptoms of polio are clinically indistinguishable from flu symptoms. Option A is true and option B is false. Early symptoms of polio are clinically indistinguishable from flu symptoms. A true, B false. Okay, so I'll share the results. We've got a number of network, 82% that have chosen option A, true, and 18% that have chosen false.
Just to comment on the same, remember when we looked at a slide that was showing us the clinical signs and symptoms? Actually, it's very difficult to distinguish the early symptoms because we would have fever, would have all these things, but you cannot confirm until when there is paralysis, and then you have to collect the stool sample and then take it to the lab. When they isolate the poliovirus from there, that's when it is confirmed. However, the symptoms are very much similar because all these are part of the symptoms that in the 30% that of the infected children that are symptomatic, the 1% that is paralysis, and also the 70% that is actually asymptomatic. So in the symptomatic percentage, that's why we have some of these clinical symptoms that are very similar to the common flu.
Thank you, Memory. I'll now share our fifth question, which reads, the following are symptoms of poliovirus except A, flaccid paralysis, B, fever, tiredness, headache, sore throat, vomiting, stiffness, body pain, and then option C, spastic paralysis. So these are the following are symptoms of poliovirus except A, flaccid paralysis, B, fever, tiredness, headache, sore throat, vomiting, stiffness, myalgia, and C, spastic paralysis. Okay, I'll end the poll over here, and we've got an interesting number that 86% that have chosen option C, spastic paralysis, as answer to be ruled out.
Okay, true. Flaccid paralysis is one of the symptoms for AFP. And then we have fever, tiredness, headache, and throat. Yes, like we are saying, they're very similar to common flu. So those are the symptoms. But when we talk of spastic paralysis, this is not true because the symptoms of poliovirus and when we look at the AFP child, the kind of paralysis is actually floppy, flaccid, and they may have all those. So the spastic paralysis is actually not true, and they say answer.
All right, thank you so much, Memory, which brings us to our last poll question. And our last poll question reads, what is acute flaccid paralysis? So this is option A reads sudden onset of floppy paralysis in children less than 15 years with polio. And B is sudden onset of floppy paralysis. Sorry, option A is without polio. B is sudden onset of floppy paralysis in children less than 15 years with polio, and C is acute onset of spastic paralysis. Okay, I'll end the poll over here. And I guess some learning has taken place. We have 74% that have chosen option A, which is sudden onset of floppy paralysis in children less than 15 years, not necessarily with polio.
Yes, if I may comment, number 2 would confuse because somebody, the answer says sudden onset of floppy paralysis in children under the age of 15 with polio. Remember, polio is only confirmed after an isolation at the laboratory. So before that, AFP, which is the acute flaccid paralysis, is a sudden onset of paralysis in children of less than 15 years old. And this could be any, it's not necessarily when there is that sudden onset of paralysis that it is actually polio. It could be due to different other reasons. However, polio presents itself only in that sort of paralysis where it's acute, floppy, and flaccid, and that means all AFP cases actually are a suspect for polio, but not all polio, not all AFP cases are polio. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. So that brings us to the end of our presentation today. I hope we've learned quite a lot from this wonderful presentation. Thank you so much, Memory. A big thank you to our panel of experts, and a thank you to the network as well as our IT team for helping us today. I think we'll end the session over here.